everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today for our virtual event focused on essential skills for emerging leaders. My name is Tondra Murray. I'm absolutely thrilled to be here with you. Today's presentation is the first installment in a series of live virtual sessions for the 2018 IEEE Women in Engineering International Leadership Conference. The virtual track is brought to you courtesy of our sponsor, Ericsson. The entire series of events will take place on Wednesdays from now through May. So we've branded the series hashtag We Wednesday. That's hashtag WIEWEDNESDAY. In order to participate in the session today or to ask a question of me, please join the conversation on Twitter and YouTube live chat. Just send your questions and again, use the hashtag WIE Wednesday, We Wednesday. That's hashtag WIEWEDNESDAY. Or you can follow us at WeILC. That's at WIEILC. We'll get to as many questions as we can possibly take towards the end of the session. So just by way of introduction, as I mentioned, my name is Tondra Murray. I am a career strategist and life coach. I'm also an engineering educator. I have more than 20 years of experience in both industry and academia. I started my career at IBM as a technologist. I focused on user interface and user experience, worked with software design. I then transitioned into management. I was a technical manager in a number of areas: software development, support, architecture, operations. I made a pivot in my own career and moved to university life. And so I'm currently an administrator and an adjunct faculty member at Duke University in the School of Engineering. I also have my own coaching practice, Engineer Your Bliss. I work with professional women who are looking to reboot their careers and use their natural talents to do more of the work they love. I have undergraduate degrees in computer science and electrical engineering from Spelman College and Georgia Tech. I have a doctorate in industrial engineering from North Carolina State University. I'm a certified Gallup strengths coach, and I'm also a credentialed executive coach. I'm super passionate about helping early to mid-career professionals develop and position their leadership competencies. And so that's exactly what we're going to do here today. So let's go ahead and get started and dive into the topic. So there's a worksheet that was referenced in the communications that you received about this webinar. And so you can go back into those communications and pull the link, or you can go to the WeILC website, where you will find a link posted to the worksheet as well. It's a reference that you can use as we discuss the topic today. My hope is that it will jumpstart your ability to think about some things that you might do differently. But I also want you to use it beyond this session. So it's a reference as we talk, but you won't have the opportunity to complete it in full during this session. I'd love it if you could refer to it. So pull it up if you have it. If you've printed it out, fantastic. And we will launch in. You'll notice that it's called an action planning worksheet, and that is on purpose. My goal here is to create an interactive opportunity for you to reflect, to assess yourself, but then also to kind of put some plans in place. So the operative word there is action planning. I'd like you to do some things with the information that you hear today and the things that we discuss. So again, I'm super excited to be here today. I'd like to start just by asking everyone a question. Remember, you can use the YouTube live chat or Twitter with the hashtag WeWednesday to interact at any point during the discussion today. The question I'd like to ask is, who is on with us today? What countries are represented? If you can type your country into the YouTube live chat or into Twitter, that would be fantastic. Use the hashtag so we can kind of converge everyone who's here with us today. I'd love to shout out the individuals who are joining us. So please go ahead and do that. So, all right, let's see. So we have Nigeria, India, Brazil, Canada represented. Fantastic. Fantastic. Great. California. All right, representing for the West Coast of the US. New Jersey. Fantastic. Amazing. Good, good, good. Great. Okay. Rhode Island. All right. Another came in. Rhode Island. Fantastic. I think it's really powerful to convene so many people in one place, literally from around the world. And so I thank you for being here live. If you're watching this call later on as a replay, that's fantastic too. It's all about having the opportunity to think about this content and to leverage it in your day-to-day. So the topic here is emerging leadership, emerging leadership. And oh, let me pop back. Bangladesh, Honduras. Let me give a shout out. There's some more that came in, so let me not, I won't leave anyone off. Fantastic. Again, thank you so much. Super excited to have such a diverse audience convened with us today. So you may ask yourself the question, what is an emerging leader, right? What does it mean to be an emerging leader? I think of it in two different ways. One, it can be a person who's not sure whether they want to take on the helm of leadership. You might be very early career. You might be in the 0 to 5 range where you're really just getting kind of your bearings around your career. Or you may be more experienced. You may be in the 5 to 8 year range, maybe even 5 to 10 year range, where you've had some different work experiences and you really want to refine your toolkit. You're aware to a greater degree of what you don't know, and you want to flesh that out. And so my hope today is that in both instances, whether you are early career or more mid-career, you'll be able to take some of the information here and apply it in your own business context. So I think it's important as you think about developing leadership to learn the landscape, learn the leadership landscape. And so I think there are ABCs of the leadership landscape. When it comes to being an effective leader, I think there are 3 things that you can focus on. A is your attitude, that is what you think and how other people perceive you. B, your behaviors, what you do, your actions, the steps you actually take, what you do to execute. And then C, competencies, what you know, what expertise you cultivate and then use to add value to your organization. So those are the ABCs, A for attitude, B for behaviors, and C for competencies. I think that's what I would describe in my experience as the leadership landscape. And if you can remain cognizant of those 3 elements, they can serve you. And there's always an opportunity to iteratively repeat and review and to grow. And so keep those 3 things in mind as kind of like the cornerstones of the leadership landscape. Another question that I'd like to ask of the group that's here with me live, what leadership characteristics or which leadership characteristics do you admire the most? When you think about the most compelling leaders that are in your life today, what characteristics do they possess? What do you admire from them? Please share in the chat on YouTube live chat or via Twitter. Would love to hear from you, your thoughts around some of the characteristics that you admire in very strong leaders that you either interact with at work or in other organizations, or even that you might just observe from afar. So they're coming in. So courage as one of the attributes. Fearlessness, absolutely, fearlessness. Authenticity is coming in. Fantastic. We're certainly going to talk about authenticity as one of the sub areas. Fantastic. So I see open-mindedness, ability to inspire others. Fantastic. You know, it's important to think about what you see. I think knowing what you like as a leader or what you want to become as a leader is really key. And so just being open to what you see and holding on to those things, I think can be really powerful. Taking ownership is something that's coming in as well. Being empowering others, right? And so I think effective leaders absolutely empower others and position them for success. Transparency. I think authenticity and transparency often go hand in hand. Being approachable is coming in as a characteristic. These are fantastic characteristics. Thank you so much. Willing to serve. Some of you may be familiar with the concept known as servant leadership. And that really comes down to this notion that leadership isn't about amassing and holding on to power, but it is about service, being of service, and using your expertise and your influence and all the things that you bring to bear to help other people. So fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you. Those are all great characteristics. Again, this is an exercise that you can do at home beyond this session. Take the worksheet and just really reflect on the characteristics that are powerful to you and the things that stand out to you. And it's likely that you may be able to connect in and figure out how you can do more of those things yourself. So excellent. Thanks for sharing that. All right, great. So I'm going to talk about a competency model that I developed while I was at IBM. This was actually a piece of research that I did many years ago. I interviewed close to 70 technical managers at IBM and at other technical companies. And I asked about the factors for success. What were the attributes that these leaders noted in their population, particularly among their employees who are successful? What characteristics could they describe? And so just based on the input, and this was from both technical leaders as well as technical managers, I created a taxonomy, and from that taxonomy developed what I'm calling a competency model. And so there's 6 features of the competency model that I want to share with you today. We will talk about the 6 competencies, and then on the worksheet, you'll see there's a space for you to kind of reflect and journal and look at some ratings for yourself in each area. Don't panic. If you don't have the worksheet, you can go to the WE ILC website and grab it. You'll see the competencies listed. I'll move through them somewhat quickly today, but you'll have access to them, so please don't panic about that. The 6 competencies, I'll just review them kind of up front here and then at the end, and then we'll dig into each one. Presence, which reflects demeanor and conduct. Self-awareness, that's context for yourself and others around you. Collaboration, that's working with others to achieve goals. Engagement, that's active connection with the organization. Knowledge, that's continuous learning and development. And then performance, that's execution with excellence. Now, these are the ways that I've described these 6 competencies based on the information that I collected during my research. But one of the most important things, I think, is for you to figure out what each of these 6 competencies means to you personally and in the context of your organization. And so the other thing I'll say too is these are ordered in the way that I think is important, but you might decide, oh, I'd really put performance at the top based on the way that it's valued in my organization, or, oh, knowledge is really critical to me. I'm a lifelong learner, and so that really would go at the top for me. So these aren't alphabetized on purpose, just by virtue of how I developed the model and kind of the idea of starting from the inside out. Presence is what people see first, so that's kind of what I started with, but the idea that you're working within yourself and then branching out to connect with other people. But you can certainly rank these or focus on these in the way that's most appropriate for you. So those are the 6 competencies that we're going to dig into today. The other thing I want to say is there are 2 behaviors that we will cover in each competency area, just to jumpstart you, just to give you a feel for how you might direct some of your activities. But again, if there are other activities that come to mind or other behaviors that come to mind for each competency that are more appropriate for you, then absolutely focus on what will serve you best. Okay, so there are 3 steps for each competency that we are going to cover. And again, you won't have time to do all of these fully, but I want you to think about it. I want you to take notes as you go along if it's appropriate, or if you have questions for yourself or for me, jot them down. When we get towards the end of the session, we'll open it up for questions and we can dig in any way that you'd like. But there are 3 steps that I'd like you to focus on as we move through our discussion today. The first is to examine, what does the competency mean to me? So it's really important for you to layer on your own perspective, your own interpretation, your own value system around what the competency can do to serve you, okay? So examine what it means for you. Assess how you're doing with the specific behaviors that I share. So I want you to be honest. No one's going to see these ratings but you. And so actively and honestly assess yourself in terms of where you are. And then act. What will I commit to doing differently? What are you going to do differently as a result of thinking, reflecting, and hearing about the opportunities in this particular competency area? So you'll see on the worksheet, examine, assess, and act are kind of the steps that we'll want to move through today. Okay, so let's talk about the first competency, which is presence. Presence reflects kind of demeanor and conduct, how you carry yourself, how you move through the world. And so again, examine, what does this mean for me? On the worksheet, you'll see there's a spot where you can kind of journal a little bit. Take some notes now if it's appropriate, right? Presence may have a different meaning to you. But think about when you think of presence, particularly some of you may be familiar with the term executive presence, right? There are all sorts of workshops and books and resources to help people cultivate executive presence. And executive presence is often meant to mean the influence, the positioning, the credibility. How can you create that when you interact with people in meetings, when you communicate via email, when you walk into a room? And so I similarly think of presence as just the general way that you carry yourself. So think about what that means for you. There are 2 behaviors that I want to emphasize in the presence competency category. And the first is to be authentic, Be yourself. So how much of yourself do you bring to the workplace? How much of an opportunity do you have to bring yourself to the workplace? I think that truth in terms of who you are and in terms of what your values are is really important. Alignment of your values with your organization, I think, is really important. And so bringing your whole self and your honest self is a lot easier to manage as well. I think when you dabble in being less than authentic, then you have to remember what you've said and who you've said it to and who you pretended to be in different situations. There's a lot to be said for the not only integrity, but just the ease that comes with being yourself. And so be authentic, I think, is one of the foundational elements of the presence competency. How can you do that if you're not doing that already? So in the assess category, you'll see there's some ratings there. Rate yourself, right? How authentic are you? There may be limitations to how authentic you can be. That's a different conversation. But think about how much of yourself you bring to the workplace. The second behavior I want to focus on is envision your future self. Envision your future self. And what that means is, and you guys are going to love this because I think STEM techies, I think this is something that's very natural for us. You can reverse engineer kind of your destiny, right? So if you think about the type of leader that you want to be, you think about how you want to make an impact or who you want to influence. Think about what that person looks like. Think about yourself in that position, and then back up and say, what do I have to do to get there, right? So if I want to be an incredible, compassionate leader, what do I need to do now so that 25 years from now, the people that worked for me or in my organization or on my team would say that about me, would describe me as a compassionate leader. If I want to drive significant change and lead to the development of transformational products that literally change lives, what kinds of experiences do I need to have along the way that will position me and allow me to do that? And so envision your future self and then begin kind of enabling that person now, right? So if you want to be seen as a very knowledgeable leader who always stayed on the cutting edge of trends, what are you doing now to read about emerging technologies? What are you doing now to learn about the newest, greatest things in the world of tech, for example? So think about where you want to be and then start modeling some of those behaviors now. You can absolutely do that. And then finally, what will I commit to do differently, right? So action is about doing something. And I want to make a point here. In all of these competencies, acting is not about acting with perfection. It is about what I describe as imperfect action, meaning doing something to move yourself forward. So please don't get caught up in the analysis paralysis perfection trap, right? Thinking I can only take action to enhance my toolkit as a leader when I can do something perfectly. That's just not true. It's simply not true. So taking action, I think, is really, really key. Think about what you'll commit to do differently when it comes to presence. Think about what you'll do differently when it comes to presence. And then certainly as we go along, you'll see a notes section on the bottom of each page. You can capture notes. You may already be doing that. Fantastic if so. But that is presence. So that's our first competency. Okay, the second competency I want to talk about is self-awareness. Self-awareness. And again, I described that as context for self and others around us. And so ask yourself, what does self-awareness really mean to me? Is it about emotional intelligence? Is it about how I represent myself? Is it about how knowledgeable I am about my opportunities and what I can do well versus maybe what I don't do so well? Think about what self-awareness means to you. There are two behaviors that I want to describe again for this second competency. The first is cultivate global awareness. Cultivate global awareness. And this may seem a little counterintuitive, but at the end of the day, self-awareness is about you, but it's also about the people around you. And so cultivating global awareness is really about understanding how your perspective differs from others. And by perspective, I mean the lenses through which you view the world. Everyone, I imagine everyone has this set of glasses through which they see the world, this rose-colored, in some cases or not, set of glasses that kind of tint the world. And those glasses are tinted by your experiences and your upbringing and your education and your personality. But there's value in acknowledging and exploring the differences between you and the others around you. And so being self-aware is knowing yourself, but it's also recognizing kind of your opportunity to learn from other people around you. And so I encourage you, assess the degree to which you do that. Is everyone around you in your world just like you? Is everyone around you, have they had the same experiences? If so, what are you missing out on in terms of some of the differences that you could leverage, either in developing a technical solution or in developing stronger relational skills, right? Just think about yourself, but think about the people around you and how you can leverage some of those differences when you see them. The second piece of self-awareness, or the second behavior I want to emphasize, is apply your talents. Apply your talents. And that comes down to a very fundamental idea of knowing what you do well and doing more of it. So as I mentioned, I'm a Clifton Strengths coach. I'm a Gallup certified strengths coach. I love the strengths philosophy, right? It's this idea of work in the area where you are strong, work in the area where you can really make a difference and an impact. If you don't know what you do well, then you can't really do it as often. And so if you aren't familiar with the Clifton Strengths Assessment, that's an assessment that you can take yourself. It has a very nominal investment for a couple of trips to Starbucks or to your local sweet shop or coffee shop. You can take the assessment online and review a report of your top 5 strengths. You can also use some other free tools. There's a tool known as the VIA Inventory, VIA, VIA Inventory. You can Google it, and that's a free assessment of 24 character strengths. And so again, it can give you a reflective ranked ordering list of your character strengths, the things that you naturally do well. So I think it's important to understand your strengths. This doesn't mean ignore your weaknesses, but it means your best bet for making an impact, for making a difference, is by doing the things that you naturally do well. So apply your talents, and applying your talents may begin with learning what they are to begin with if you're unsure. So again, think about your assessment of yourself. How would you rank yourself? And then think about what you can do differently. It may be your action in this case may be reflect on my strengths or discover my strengths, right? And so think about that and take some notes. Take some notes. I get excited about strengths, so I'll move on to the next one, our next competency. So collaboration is the third competency I want to talk about, and that is working with others to achieve goals, right? Think about it. What does effective collaboration look like, right? I'm sure that many of you can think of instances where you've been on teams that have been fantastic and that have really just created results that were above and beyond your expectations. What did that look like, right? What enabled that? And likewise, I'm sure many of us can think about teams that we've been on that were less than stellar and perhaps weren't as effective as we wanted them to be. So what does it mean to you? What does it mean to collaborate? And what does good collaboration look like? So the 2 behaviors I want to talk about under collaboration are to build relationships and to leverage diversity. So with building relationships, think about who you can partner with and learn from. And this gets back to that self-awareness and that global perspective, right? Recognizing and leveraging people around you. So are you just building relationships with more senior individuals? So managers and executives or others who are kind of above you in the organizational hierarchy? Are you cultivating relationships with peers? Are you mentoring individuals who may be more junior to you, right? Think about the people who are outside of your organization, maybe in professional societies or organizations, maybe who just have similar interests, be they technical or be they more personally driven. You never know how your next relationship can serve you. You never know how your next connection can be of value. And that's not only as a resource, but just as a growth tool, right? Just so that you are exposed to someone and something different. And so build relationships. Don't be afraid to reach out and to meet someone new or to establish a new connection. You have just as much to give to individuals as they have to give to you. That's the other point I want to make. And so building relationships doesn't have to always be about consuming. It can also be about giving. And in fact, the best relationships are about mutual exchange. So build relationships. The second behavior I want to talk about is leverage diversity. So when it comes to teams, we don't always have a choice about the teams that we create. But again, there's so much value when it comes to acknowledging and leveraging differences. And so think about the differences in discipline. Think about differences in terms of experiences or background or profession or industry, right? There's so much that we can learn from each other just by leveraging those differences. And so as you collaborate with others, sometimes we gravitate towards similarity. It's very comfortable, it's very familiar. There's nothing wrong with that, but the real innovation, the real opportunity for growth, the sweet spot can come from connecting with someone who makes you look at something in a brand new way, or who wants to learn about your technique or your approach to solving a problem. Maybe you're in a different industry, or maybe you work on a different type of product, but someone in a totally different space can hear about what you've done, and then it's transferable, right? They can apply it to something they're doing. So embrace diversity, not only in terms of ethnic and cultural background. I think those are all important, but but diversity of knowledge, diversity of perspective. So leverage that, and kind of, ask yourself, how frequently am I embracing diversity or leveraging diversity when it comes to collaboration? How often do I take advantage of my interaction with someone who's had a different experience from me? So again, think about what you'll commit to do differently, take some notes, but a couple of things to think about in the space of collaboration, a couple things to think about. All right. Our next competency is engagement. And so I describe engagement as active connection with the organization. And so you may ask yourself, what does engagement look like in my area, right? On my team, in my department? What does it mean to be engaged? The Gallup organization does all sorts of surveys on engagement, particularly in the US, but also worldwide. They do an annual engagement survey, actually. And it's fascinating, from a leadership perspective. In recent years, Gallup has kind of revealed that typically 3 out of 10 people are engaged at work, right? 3 out of 10 people. And so if you're a leader, or if you're positioning yourself to become a leader, the last thing you want is to be connected with individuals or organizations full of people who are not engaged, right? And so making sure that people feel connected to the mission of the organization, making sure that people feel that their work is valued, and that individuals have an understanding of how they contribute to the overall goals of the organization. I think it's really important. As an emerging leader, you have a responsibility to understand what it means to be engaged, but also to kind of drive some of that engagement, not only for yourself, but for the teams that you support or that you interact with as well. You don't have to be a manager in charge to help the engagement culture in your organization. You don't have to be a senior executive leader to positively influence the culture of engagement on your team. And so just think about what engagement means to you. 2 behaviors that I want to emphasize for this competency. The first is go beyond your comfort zone. Go beyond your comfort zone. And I know it may sound a bit cliche. I know it may sound, I've heard that before, go beyond your comfort zone. But it's really true, right? It's important that you think about how you can stretch beyond the standard, the status quo. I saw the best quote not too long ago: your comfort zone is your cage, or your comfort is your cage. And it really struck me, because I think it's a pretty interesting thought, right? Yes, we easily and readily do the things that we're comfortable doing, but they can also be gates for us. They can be limiters for us. And so go beyond your comfort zone. If you want to connect in and figure out how you can add value in your organization, you want to serve at a higher level on your team, connect in, find out what the core problems are that you're solving, find out how your mission supports the more senior leadership team, find out why it's so important for your team to be successful if you don't know, right? And in many cases, that's going to mean that you need to go above and beyond kind of the usual, to go beyond your comfort zone. The second behavior I want to emphasize here, and this sounds so basic, but I think it's really important, is to take action, right? Take action. Hope is not a strategy. That is one of my favorite things to say to my clients, my coaching clients. Hope is not a strategy. So you can hope and wish and want a whole lot of things, but if you do nothing, then you're not going to connect in, you're not going to demonstrate kind of what you know, you're not going to have the ability to make an impact. So take action. And again, this gets back to imperfect action. No need to be perfect, no need to rehearse and get everything just so. Put yourself out there, do something, figure out how you can add value. And if you're not clear, ask someone, right? Find someone that you know and trust so you can figure out the best way to connect into your organization and serve. That's how leaders are revealed, and that's how leaders are groomed, is by putting themselves out there, moving beyond the comfort zone, and taking action. All right. So our next competency is knowledge, and that's about continuous learning and development. And so again, what does knowledge mean to you in terms of your role and where you want to go in your career? How critical is knowledge and expertise, right? Generally, we're always learning and growing, but in some cases, it may be more about execution, or in other cases, it may be more about influence and advocacy, right? So think about the role that ideas play in your role and what opportunity you want to have to leverage knowledge going forward. 2 behaviors I'd like you to assess as you think about knowledge. The first is around protecting your time. And this is a little non-traditional, but I think it's important to think about, right? Think about the ways that you spend your time. We have 24 hours in a day. We often have to-do lists that overfloweth, right? And so how are you protecting your time? What are you doing that will either advantage you in your organization, will expose you to more of the experiences that you want to add to your toolkit, will allow you to contribute in ways that are really truly meaningful, right? Sometimes it's easy to get pulled into busy work. We all have busy work and maybe some more trivial tasks that are important, right, and necessary to do the business at hand. But if you find yourself always doing those things, if you find yourself always kind of pulled into the crumbs of what needs to be done, you need to step back and think, how can you protect your time, right? How can you position yourself so that you have the opportunity to learn and grow in a way that you want to? You won't always have your first choice, right? You won't always get to work on exactly what you want to work on. So please don't think I'm suggesting that you go to your manager and say, you know what, I'm going to protect my time, and so I'm no longer going to do the tasks that you've given me. That is not what I'm saying. What I am saying is, for the things that you can control, be mindful, right? Are you going home and, watching 5 hours of TV when you could be on lynda.com, learning a new skill, or you could read a trade article about something that's really, truly interesting to you? Just think about protecting your time. Nothing wrong with having fun and having downtime, but think about how you can leverage your schedule to support the things you want to learn and to support the things you need to grow. The other thing I'd say is refine your expertise, right? So think about areas where you can add specific value. So think about an area where you can focus, and maybe you have unique experiences, or maybe you have a unique set of, you've done unique training. What is it that you can do to continue to refine and to improve your expertise in a very particular area? If you become known as the leader in a particular area, technically, then that's a way to stand out. That's a way to differentiate yourself. And I want to make an important point here. So employers will often send you to conferences or to training, and that can vary, right? So I know with online training and even webinars like this, right? I mean, there is a great opportunity now to do things remotely, but you may not always get the support to go to the conference or get the support to take the class. And if it's really important to you, think about what you can do to invest in yourself. Right? And so it may not always be your employer who is sending you to a conference or writing a check for you to take a class, right? It may be that you decide to register for a credential online, or you decide that you're going to go to a summit or a meeting because it's an important part of your own professional development. So refining your expertise is about figuring out what you want to do, but also enabling yourself to do it. So again, love it if you can get support from your organization to do things around education and knowledge and training, but don't be afraid to invest in yourself. I think it's really important to be willing to do that. So again, act. What will you commit to do differently? Hopefully I'm kicking up some thoughts here as you think about your opportunities to do some things. And so make some notes about that, or come back and we'll revisit it. If you have questions, feel free to, we're going to ask those in the YouTube chat. So make sure you add those, queue up those questions in the YouTube chat. You can begin doing that if you haven't already done so. We have one more competency to cover, and then I will kind of get one more area of feedback from you, and then we will jump right into questions. So feel free to go ahead and queue up those questions if you have them, or if you've gathered them kind of to date as we've been working through the competencies. So our last competency is performance, and that is execution with excellence. And so think about it. What does top performance look like in your organization? When you think about people who are just doing stellar work, what is it that they're doing? What is it about their performance that stands out? And what does this mean for you? If you are unfamiliar with the way that performance is assessed in your organization, then, make sure that you're clear on that, right? Nothing is worse than being assessed via a system that you don't understand. So make sure you talk with your manager or mentors or other colleagues so that you understand the timing and the requirements and the framework for assessment of performance in your organization. 2 behaviors that I want you to think about when it comes to this competency as kind of food for thought. The first is to honor your commitments. Sounds so simple, sounds so straightforward. It is so easy to fill our plates and to take on more than we can handle. Honor your commitments. And if that means saying no, then say no, right? When you can, right? When you can push back, or you need to draw some limits, or if you need to say to your manager, I have a lot going on, so help me prioritize. I could use your assistance as I prioritize here, right? It's important to be able to honor your commitments. Nothing is worse than taking on many, many things and then not following through on any of them. And so you want to honor your commitments. You want to be known as the person who follows through. You also, from a behavior perspective, I would encourage you to think about seeking regular feedback. And so not just receiving feedback when it comes to you, but actively asking for feedback, actively saying to the people around you, hey, I'd love to get your thoughts on my recent performance in the client meeting, or I've put together a technical brief and I'm concerned about how well I articulate or describe our solution. Could you give me some feedback, right? Be specific about what you want to get feedback about. Don't just say, hey, give me some feedback. Be specific. I want some feedback on my technical rendering, or I want some feedback on my recent delivery to the client. Etc. You want to give some specific examples, but be the person who seeks regular feedback. People will know you are open, they'll know you're receptive, and they will also be more likely to share with you. It's challenging not to take feedback personally. I think with practice, that's something that gets a little bit easier. I think to some extent, human beings always personalize feedback to some extent, but no, it's not personal. It's about enhancing your performance, enhancing the value that you provide to your organization, but also the way that you showcase your expertise. And so when you get that feedback, you may be perceived in a way that you don't even realize you're being perceived, right? And so getting that input from others can be really, really helpful. You can get feedback from your manager, from your peers, from family, from others who know you well. And being open-minded to that feedback, when you ask for it, you have to be ready to hear it. But just know that seeking that feedback can be key to enhancing and really accelerating your performance. So again, assess yourself in those areas. Think about what you can do to kind of switch things up a bit, right? What can you do differently? Think about how you might act. And then again, if there are any notes that you want to take, then grab those notes. So those are our 6 competencies. I know we moved through those very quickly, but the worksheet is there for you to reflect and to kind of leverage each of these areas kind of to your advantage when appropriate. I do want to ask, we're about to get to Q&A. I do want to ask just very quickly in the chat, which competency of the 6 that you've heard about will you focus on? I'd love to hear from people in the chat, either via YouTube live chat or on Twitter. Which competency will you focus on now that you've heard about the 6? And let me go back and I will repeat the 6. So there's presence, there's self-awareness, collaboration, engagement, knowledge, and performance. Of the 6 that you've heard about today, which one will you focus on? I just love to know what has resonated with people today. And then we'll get to some Q&A in the chat. I see some questions already coming through, but what areas will you all focus on? Would love to hear what areas have resonated based on what you've heard. Presence. So someone said presence. Someone said engagement. Fantastic, fantastic, fantastic. Love to hear your thoughts. Because, again, if you want different results, you've got to do things differently. So knowledge. Okay, someone's voting for knowledge. Excellent, excellent. Self-awareness. Fantastic. Good, good, good. All right, great. I really encourage you to think about how you can use what you've heard today. These 6 areas I think are foundational in terms of things you can add to your toolkit, right? In many cases, you are likely already doing many of these things, but just think about what you can do to raise the bar for yourself and for the value you deliver to the world. Knowledge and engagement, so some more input, knowledge, engagement, fantastic, fantastic. So I think all 6 areas provide an opportunity for you to grow. So excellent. Okay, good. If you have questions that you have gathered kind of along the way, now's the time where you can also share those questions via chat. You can use the YouTube live chat or Twitter with the hashtag WeWednesday to flag your question, and we will get through as many as we possibly can today. So I see a question in the chat, and so I'll go ahead and read it aloud and then share an answer. So question from Jennifer: my team is very busy on a regular basis. Is there a good way to ask for feedback when stress levels are high? Great question, great question. I think that part of the challenge in beginning to ask questions or beginning to ask for feedback when stress levels are high is that people may not always be positioned to give those answers in the most thoughtful, reflective way, nor may they may also not be as appreciative of that opportunity. I think part of the key is make feedback a part of the regular culture, right? Make feedback and kind of sharing information with each other, even if it's on more on a one-on-one basis, right? Make that something that is a more regular, natural part of the cycle. And then that way, when times are stressful, people will still recognize the value that comes from sharing feedback and the importance of giving kind of, in fact, in many cases, stressful times are exactly when you need to give feedback, right? Because that's when things break or that's when things kind of overflow, right? That's when a system may not be optimal. But I think it's important to start that process when people aren't as stressed, right? When there can be kind of a natural introduction to the idea of getting feedback. And it can be as simple as just asking a question, right? It can be simple as simple as asking a question as a team lead from a team lead. Or inviting people to give feedback to you from a leadership perspective too, to say, hey, I know, maybe you come from the downslope of the stressful time and you say, hey, I know this last cycle, that last release was really, really stressful. And so I'd love to get your feedback about some things that we might do differently or some things that I can do to better support the team or things that I can do to kind of, help us be better positioned to handle some of the challenges that we dealt with during this last time, right? And so that's one of the things that I would suggest. Regular, consistent feedback culture will be more readily amenable or open to kind of inquiry during those times of high stress. So that's my answer. Okay, excellent. Have another question. Another question. Do you think that extroverts get an edge over the introverts because they are better at engagement? So very interesting question. I think there are advantages to being both extroverted and introverted. And I think that you can be an incredible leader and be an introvert. And so, I think in some cases, introverts engage, they just engage in very different ways, right? They engage in ways that maybe aren't as obvious. In some cases, introverts can be more relational, even though they are quiet and maybe not the people who are always talking, right? But engagement isn't always about being the loudest in the room. Engagement isn't always about being the one who's waving your hand wildly. And so I think there are advantages in both cases. There's a book entitled Quiet that's all about the power of leadership for introverts and the power of introverts in terms of being really incredible models of leadership. And so I think sometimes the perception is that extroverts have an advantage, but I don't think it's always true. And I think that in some cases, extroversion can actually hurt people, right? If it's not leveraged in a way that is respectful or inclusive. So I think it can work for both parties, extroverts and introverts. Okay, excellent. Another question. Any suggestions for females in terms of being resilient and proactive. Resilient and proactive. So in terms of being resilient and proactive, I would think one of the biggest things that I would share and that I share with my students, I share with clients, is really about imperfect action, and it's about not being paralyzed by fear. I think that in many cases, and this is a limited framing based on my experience and my context, right, and my own personal experiences. I think sometimes women aren't proactive, and I know as a woman, I have sometimes not been proactive because of fear, right? Because I don't want to fail, because I don't want to mess up, because I want things to be great, right? I want them to be optimal. And so therefore I do nothing at all, right? And that's where kind of you get, that analysis paralysis. That's where you end up being reactive instead of proactive because you didn't put yourself out there because you were so mired in the fear of not being perfect. And so I think it's really important to just kind of stay in motion. I think it's important to know that failure is just feedback, right? And we judge, when things don't go according to our plan, we judge them so harshly, right? If something doesn't go well, and I think even failure is kind of a harsh word, right? Sometimes it's just all data. But I like to say, and I say it to myself, I say it to the people that I care for, and I say it for, others in my world, failure is feedback, meaning if things don't go the way you wanted, it's just data. So take the data and swizzle it and do something else. And that's how you become resilient, is by trying again and again. That's how you position yourself to make an impact, is by learning, right? No one who's ever succeeded, like now, we've got the Olympics in play, right? Very few Olympic athletes will tell you that they, have done every, jump perfectly, or they've done every run perfectly. They haven't. In fact, that's the whole point. And so putting yourself out there, moving through and doing something, even when you know it's not perfect, even when you know it's far from perfect, and then picking yourself back up and trying again if the results aren't the results you were after, I think is really the key. Okay. All right. So hopefully that answers your question around being resilient and proactive. Okay. Another question. So when our performances will be humiliated by not getting proper feedback and not getting the things we deserve, how can we uphold our motivation and encouragement for the future? Okay. So excellent. So I think what I'm taking from this question is this notion of when your performance is not going to be supported, you're not going to get the feedback or the engagement or the guidance that you would ideally like and that you deserve. How can you still stay inspired? How can you still remain encouraged? And I think that a lot of that has to do with understanding your personal motivation, your what we call intrinsic motivation, your why, quote unquote, your why. What is it that motivates you to get up every day? What are you trying to achieve in your career? What is kind of the ideal end state in terms of either what you want to contribute to the world, or the kind of work you want to do, or the kind of influence you want to have? In many cases, our motivation is certainly supported by those around us. And, who doesn't love recognition and appreciation? I think most human beings love recognition and appreciation. But there are times where you need to draw upon yourself for that. There are times where you need to pull from within to gain that. And that's part of what this whole reflection process is about, right? To say, well, what does this mean to me? And how often am I doing these things, right? The why, the motivation, the reason, and fundamentally why you get up every morning and why you want to do well at work, or why you want to make a difference in your role, that's really what pulls you forward. Having a network of individuals who share kind of that desire to make a difference, I think also matters. So having a tribe of people who share kind of your vision, or just share your desire to even create a vision for themselves, is also important. So fundamentally, you've got to have that intrinsic motivation and that understanding of what kind of moves you every day, and go to that, call on that, and then also having a tribe of people who unconditionally support you and are as vulnerable and sharing their hopes and desires and dreams and fears, as well as a network of support. And you can find that within work. You can also find that outside of work. Okay. Excellent. Let's see, another question here. Do you have any suggestions on how to be more of yourself when your coworkers have already been working with a different version of you for a while? I love this. I love this. So that's where you just show up and you kind of rip the mask off and you say, haha, here's who I really am, right? I think that's a great question. We grow and evolve as human beings. And so if you found that you've been sending your representative instead of yourself to the workplace, I think it's important over time to begin to allow more of the real you to show up. And if people quizzically look at you or they're a little confused, um, you can kind of say, this is who I am, or this is where I'm moving towards, right? Or you can opt not to say anything at all. At the end of the day, you get to be who you want to be, right? It's not really for people's approval, or it's not really for them to co-sign on who you are. But I think it's important. If you've been sending your representative, if you haven't been as authentic, move closer to that space of being yourself and see how it feels, right? You'll converge on being yourself, and you'll converge on being who you need to be. And the people around you, they'll either, get it or they won't. But at the end of the day, it's not really up to them. So, hopefully that's something that a transition you can make smoothly. But ultimately it's in your hands. You get to decide when you want to do it and how you want to do it. But great question. I think many of us have sent our representatives instead of ourselves, and then gotten a little trapped in that case. So I hope you're in a position where you can begin to do more of that. All right. Okay. Well, I think that, let's see. Okay. Oh, there's one other question here. All right. I'm sorry. I didn't see this other question. Okay. So the question is about things to enhance intrinsic motivation. If your surrounding is not encouraging and people are always criticizing you, how can we grow our network? Great question. Find some new places to go. Find some new people to interact with, right? If your surroundings are negative and people are not supportive and there's a lot of critique, there are plenty of other places in the world that you can go. So be it a professional organization, be it a social club, be it a sport or an activity, something recreational that you like to do, right? There are plenty of ways to connect with people who share your excitement about something, be it something techie or something that's not so techie, right? Find some new people, right? Find some new people and find some individuals who are going to be supportive of you in a positive way. I think it can be very hard when you're in an environment where you feel beaten down and where kind of your day-to-day environment might not always be supportive. Just know you always have a choice, whether it's connecting with people at work over lunch, or having a coffee break, or going to try having a new experience, right? And just meeting people and having a new experience. You've got the opportunity to connect with new people. So do that, right? Just know you're not stuck. You always have a choice. You may work in a place, and you may continue to work in a place where you don't always feel as aligned with the people around you, but that's not the only source of energy. And in fact, you can find and sustain and bring your own energy in places outside of work. I think that's really important actually to explore. If all of your friends are in the workplace, if everything you do is related to your workplace, and then that workplace is negative, then it can be very limiting. Okay, another question. What if your company isn't appreciative of you being yourself? I think there are times where you need to say, okay, well, is being authentic, somehow in this environment conflicting with my values and the values of this organization, right? Or what is it about me that's not being appreciated, right? So, being authentic doesn't mean not being professional. It doesn't mean not being accountable. It doesn't mean, not being present. But being authentic means fundamentally being who you are. And if there's a disconnect between you and the organization in that regard, then I think you do have to look at the values of the organization and where there might be a misalignment, right? Could there be a better alignment for you? I'm not saying leave your job. I'm definitely not saying that, but I'm saying think about what could be more optimal in the organization and what maybe isn't as supported, right? What is it about you that maybe is getting pushback, or what aspects of your personality are being questioned, or maybe even misinterpreted or misperceived, right? That's what I would encourage you to do. But reflect and think, and it may be the case that there's a misalignment and you want to go to a new organization, or you want to find an opportunity where more of what you bring to the table is appreciated. I do think ultimately you can be your best self when you can be all of who you are, and that's valued in the workplace. So reflect and think about it and see what opportunities present themselves for you. All right. Okay, well, great. Well, thank you for all of the questions. I'm so appreciative. Thank you for all the engagement. Fantastic questions. And thanks to everyone for, joining today. I think we've had a fantastic interaction. If there are questions that you have that you did not have the chance to ask today, please feel free to reach out to me via email. My website is on the bottom of the worksheet, but my address is Latondra, Latondra, at latondramurray.com. And so you'll see my website. Feel free to reach out. Like I said, shoot me an email. I'd be happy to answer additional questions or support you in any way that I can. So before we sign off, I just want to ask that everyone keep the conversation going on social media. You can use the hashtag WeWednesday or follow us on Twitter at WeILC. Both of those are channels. Follow, like I said, post, use the hashtag. Thanks again to our virtual sponsor, Ericsson. Please don't forget to sign up for the next session, which will be held on March 7th. It will be a panel discussion with Ericsson on gender parity. So I think that should be a phenomenal dialogue, and I encourage everyone to attend and participate. For more information on how to sign up, please visit the WeILC website. With that, I'll just say have a great day or evening, wherever you may be, and thank you so much for joining.